and then to leave it with Him. But believing and asking is where I've needed to grow. And it's amazing, as I believe and ask, God does answer prayer very specifically and quite powerfully. But still, we cannot base our faith on the answer to our prayers. We base our faith on the person who answers our prayers. And the answer can be no, the answer can be yes, and the answer can be wait. So do we need to be bolder? Yes. But we are not looking at the answer, we are looking at the answerer. The faith is in the answerer, who by his character does as he knows, because he understands the future we cannot see. I thought of all the times that I've gone out on dates. And I've wanted to be married for so very long. And now this is out on YouTube, so hopefully my chances will increase. Oh, I'm going to get letters from the baby preacher, I'm sure. I look back on my life and I think of all the times I've asked and all the times God has said no, and I am so deeply grateful. Not because those guys were bad guys or anything like that, but because they were not the person for me. And as I've watched some of their lives unfold, I know that without a shadow of a doubt. So even though it's hard when God says no, and sometimes you don't even know it's no. You think it's wait. It could be wait. It sounds like wait, until you realize after a decade it probably was no. So deeply grateful for those no answers. So deeply grateful. And only the perspective of advancing years can help you look back and see the beauty of God's answered no. And God answers wait. That's a beautiful thing too, because in the waiting, your faith muscle is strengthened. Because you go back to God again and again and again and again. And every time you do, you strengthen that muscle of faith. The faith lesson under this one, and I'm not reading them because they're down on your page, so I will read them. Jesus can stop suffering and restart life. He resuscitates Jairus' daughter, and he stops the suffering of this woman just by the touch of her hand. And then I put here, somehow your faith factors into the work Jesus does. I can't answer that. I wrestled with this so much. I don't have the answer for it. I do know that Jesus responds to faith, and the faith that we have factors into what he does. But I don't know the total picture. And I'm not willing to say that everything is dependent upon the quality or the quantity of your faith. Because Jesus says faith as small as a mustard seed can move a mountain. So it can't be the quality, because something very small is powerful. And it can't be the quantity, because some people, great things happen. It's a mystery. Faith is a mystery. It's operating in the unseen realm, and so I don't have all the answers to it. All I know is this. We can be bolder in our faith in reaching out to the answerer as he provides the answer, whatever that answer is. So we can be bold in asking. Don't be reduced to trusting God. Be bold in trusting God. Be bold in asking him for the things that the scriptures say that he provides, and watch God at work. Now, Mark chapter 6, we're going to have to fly through these. Mark chapter 6, I'm going to just pull out two things that Jesus displays his power over. Mark chapter 6, verses 30 through 44 is for those of us in this room who have physical needs. And in our current economic times, you know what? Food pantries are tripling in the requests. People are in dire straits. There are physical needs. There are needs in this congregation that are well disguised. People with physical needs who don't know how they're going to feed their families, and we see them every week at church. People like us who are looking to God for their physical needs. So Jesus displays power to provide physical needs. This is the story of the feeding of the 5,000. It's repeated in every one of the synoptic gospels. And Jesus, literally, in his hands, the Greek says, in his hands he multiplied that bread. So out of his hands, the bread was coming. He says to the disciples, look at this crowd. He has compassion on them. They've been following him. They've been listening to his teaching, and he has compassion on them. Again, the compassion of Jesus is a theme throughout all of these power demonstrations. It's power born out of this deep, deep, deep heart that God has for people. And he takes the loaves and the fishes and he actually multiplies them out of his hand. It's just coming from his hand. I don't even know. That's the miracle. It's just coming from him. And my faith lesson in that is I'm so happy in Jesus' hands, the little that I have is transformed into a lot. Whatever you give him, the little that you have, God is capable of taking the small thing that you have, your little loaf and your little fish, and he can transform it into a lot to feed other people. The great thing about this is the disciples, of course, all the people, he made them count them down by 50s and 100s and seat them on the grass. And so there they are. They're all getting ready for this distribution, baby. They're all sitting back, ready to go. And I'm sure the disciples were like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the worst failure in the whole world. And we're making them sit down, and now we're going to be able to see how it fails. Can we just group them all together and throw the food at them and see who can get it? No, let's group them all. And then Jesus starts this multiplying thing with the bread. And what we learn is the disciples are distributing it to the people. And can you imagine being part of that? I'm sure it's coming out of Jesus' hand. He's putting it in the basket. And then they come back for more and he puts some more in the basket. And they're like, what? So much so that at the end of this miracle, there are 12 little baskets, wicker baskets left over. And what do you think that meant? Okay, Peter, here's your basket of leftovers. And John, here's your basket of leftovers. It's almost like Jesus going, nah, 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 nah. I can do this. Jesus takes your little and makes it into a lot, which is more than enough. More than enough. Leftovers. Jesus' power is able to take the little that we have and make leftovers. It said the people ate and were satisfied. They weren't just like, oh, well, I get this little. I remember one year at the Mission Festival, we decided we'd give everybody an experience of how the third world eats. And so we had this little tiny box. Do you remember anybody at that Mission Festival? The little tiny black box. You should have heard the complaints on the evaluation forms after the Mission Festival. 8 slices of pineapple at every 8 seats, just for so many people ate all 8 slices of the pineapple because they couldn't believe we only gave them 4 little things in that box. I had a lady say to me, I'm never coming to this Mission Festival again because we had to go to McDonald's afterwards. Sorry, this is what the rest of the world, this is a gourmet meal in the rest of the world. Jesus takes this little and he makes it into a lot. Jesus takes whatever you have, whatever you think is lacking, whatever your physical need is, Jesus can meet that need and give in abundance. We just have to bring in what we have. And the last one is for those whose hearts are strangely unreceptive. Jesus displays his power to amaze the disciples. Mark chapter 6, verses 45 through 56. Another storm. This is a bookend. We started with a storm and we're ending with a storm. Another storm. And Jesus lets the disciples be in the storm, rowing against the wind. And he's up there praying. Oh, Jesus in his prayer life, man. He's up on the mountain praying, and the disciples are rowing and rowing and rowing and rowing and rowing against the wind. And Jesus finally finishes his prayer at about between 3 in the morning and 6 in the morning after the guys are all exhausted. He walks on the choppy water. You know that Jesus, he likes to show off with that water thing. And so he walks on the water, and he's about to pass them by, not because he wants to pass them by, but because he wants to, just like God did when he hid Moses in the cloud of glory by, that's the picture. Jesus wants to pass by them to encourage them. Present. And so as he's passing by, they think he's a water phantom. They think he's a ghost. Ah, we don't know who he is. And then Jesus steps in the boat. As soon as he steps in the boat, the water's calm. It's amazing. But there's an interesting little verse. If you'll go to chapter 6, I want to end here. We'll go to chapter 6.